Hello and welcome to this virtual tour of Luxor Temple. If there's one place you should definitely visit when you're here, it is this place. I know I say this about most places, but this one is so significant because it literally represents almost the entirety of ancient and modern Egyptian history. It really does. So where I'm stood here is just in front of the temple itself, and then if you look opposite, you'll see the Road of Sphinx. This is a new addition, actually. Well, a new addition to us. It is an ancient, the oldest road perhaps in Egypt that we know of, and it runs all the way for 2.7 kilometers over to Karnak, and it was used for rituals, particular rituals where they brought down the golden boats. You can see one that's kind of there in the distance, but obviously it's exaggerated size or much smaller, and brought down here for various festivals. Now, if we have a look at the front of the temple itself, you can see here there's 4 ginormous statues right in front of it. All 4 of them are Ramses II because the man loved himself. And then you have 4 standing and 2 sitting. Those again represent him as a king, and the ones with him sitting as a cult leader or a god. The reason he's sitting is because that's where you go and give him offerings. So let's move into the temple and have a quick tour. Remember guys, as always, you can pause and look around at any moment if I'm walking too fast for you. And have a look at this ginormous obelisk here. Very impressive with the baboons at the bottom. Baboons, as I've said before, in ancient Egypt were the symbol of wisdom because the ancient Egyptians believed them to be extremely clever animals. So let's continue with this tour. So continuing on from the main entrance, we come down into the columns, and this is where it starts getting interesting. This is where we start to see the cultures meeting each other that I was talking about. So as I said, pretty much every single civilization and culture in ancient Egypt and modern Egypt has met here. If you look at this building here behind me, up until these small little windows, this used to be a church at one point. So the Christians moved in here at one point, and then all this was buried. It was literally all underground. Imagine that up until the window level there became buried with sand. So then they built a mosque above it, and that kind of squarish window that you see there, that was actually the entrance to the mosque. That was the street level, and that was the door. When they eventually realized what was underneath here and they started excavating, they converted it into a window, and the other side now is the door with stairs from the current street level. And you can see there is the minaret from the Ottoman era of the mosque. There is actually another minaret just to its left, which is a much older one, which is one of the oldest minarets in Egypt. On the walls here we see a lot of illustrations of the various festivals that happen here. Now this temple, as I said, was very important to the ancient Egyptians because this is kind of where coronations, or part of the coronation, would happen for various kings, or majority of kings. It was very important. We even see Alexander the Great becoming a fully fledged pharaoh king from this temple, and I'll show you those illustrations later in there. And you can see here there's all these pictures of various offerings being made and food being carried, etc. And there's so much more in here as we go around. You can see here they're bringing all these big cows and stuff to be sacrificed as part of the festival. We see these symbols here. This symbol that kind of looks like a little arrow in a hexagon. That is to symbolize the particular festival that the cow is going to be sacrificed for. So quite an important thing. So certain animals were only good enough for certain festivals, which is quite interesting in itself. And we can see this journey, lots and lots of animals being brought into the temple to be offered up. In front of me here, we see all these figures that look like they're the same person, but they're not. They're actually children of Ramses II. Remembering that he had over 100 children. We come up to about 13 princes here, and then it starts going to princesses. The one who took over from him was here, this last one, And basically each one has his name and then what his actual job was. So if we look at like the first one here, the oldest son, we have his name here at the top, and then we know that he was the leader of the actual Egyptian army, and so on and so forth. And next to it here, we actually have an image of the temple itself. So, but it's obviously, remember, everything's in 2D. So we have the two sitting figures, as we saw at the beginning, and then the two standing figures, sorry, the four standing figures, and then the two obelisks. There's one missing today, but now we still just have the one. So again, we have this entire illustration of how the temple would have looked, plus there's additions of 4 flags that obviously don't exist anymore. Really cool. And again here, huge statue carved of one single piece. If you look at the bottom here, we'll see these individuals tied up with all these words. These guys all represent different countries that Ramses had conquered. You see them all around. So these ones here will be representing like the Syrians and Persians and all this kind of stuff. Remembering the Egyptian Empire during the reign of Ramses was one of the largest empires at the time. And then down here we see kind of more African looking figures. This is representing the more stuff to the south. So there we go. Next to him we have his wife's name down here. And again, quite an interesting drawing here, with basically this here representing the lungs, the airway, and his name being at the top, not in a cartouche, because remember, gods don't put their names in a cartouche necessarily. So when he puts his name without the cartouche, he's saying, I am a god and I control the air and life. So there we go. So we're now in the column section here. You can see, if you watch my Karnak video, you'll see the columns are of the same style with the open lotus flower at the top. It's believed that this was probably part of a bigger project where they were gonna expand these columns beyond this area, but obviously never happened. Again, we're coming back to the depictions on the wall here, and it's quite interesting. We can see all sorts of stuff happening here where they're killing the cows, slaughtering them. And this one here is quite interesting because you can see this guy here having a little sniff of the cow. That's because the meat has to be of good quality for this festival. It has to be of, it can't be a sick animal, etc. So that guy there, he's having a little sniff of the blood, making sure that it's worthy of the god's sacrifice. And this one here is really, really interesting actually, possibly one of the first animations in the world. So we have these dancers here doing like little backflips. You can see here they're doing kind of a little backflip. Now initially I thought these were all different dancers, but actually when you look at it carefully, you have this one here, and then the movement changes slightly and she goes back further and further, and she starts coming back on herself and so on, and she's kind of doing like this little acrobatics. So it's actually an animation. It's just one person with a story being told of how they're doing like a backflip. Really interesting, possibly one of the earliest animations in human history. Who knows? And then it goes on again. It shows you all the different offerings that they have there. My God, it's so hot. I am dying of this heat, literally. And I just came to sit down in the shade under one of the columns here. As soon as I sat down, a bird pooped on me. You can't chill in Egypt. You can't chill if it's not between the sun, birds pooping on you, or people asking you for money. Crazy, it's hectic. It is hectic. Don't come to Egypt, guys, anytime after April or before October. Winter months only. Otherwise you're going to suffer, literally, guys. And I'm half Egyptian, you know. My genetics are supposed to be able to deal with this heat a bit more, you know, as opposed to someone who's a bit ginger or whatever. And I'm struggling, I really am. So right, let's continue. So this area here is, I believe it's an open court area, and again people are allowed in here only in the special festivals, come in here with the offerings, etc., and to present it to go forward into the Holy of Holies, which is just down there. Right, so let me get out this lady's photo. Yeah, this guy's giving me a smile there. It's okay. So I'm making video just because I'm talking. Okay. Thank you. And you can see here some of the illustrations up on the wall in colour. Very nicely depicted. There you go, the guys are pointing for you. There you go, if you look up, you can see a lot of the depictions there for the various gods. And the sacrifices up ahead there. Thank you. Thank you, there you go, say hello. Thank you. And then we come into this room here, which is the Holy of Holies. However, if you see, there's like this inner room and there's an outer wall. So the outer wall is the original one. This is the one made by the actual ancient Egyptians, the real ancient Egyptians, the natives. And the one behind me here was actually made by the Greeks. And it's quite interesting because if you look at the quality of work, it is different. So let's talk about that. If you look at the original ancient Egyptian stuff, you can see it's in negative. So they've had to carve around the figures to create it, which means they've had to sand down pretty much the whole wall to create these figures, where on the Greek side it's just they've just carved the figures into the actual wall. So these are much easier to make because you literally just have to cut lines into the stone and then you have the figure. Where in this one you have to literally empty everything around the figures that you want to create. Now if you're wondering what's the time gap between this creation here and this creation here, it's 1,000 years difference. That's crazy, isn't it? 1,000 years before much better quality artwork. The other interesting thing here about the Greek one is this is actually Alexander the Great. You can see his name. He gives himself an Egyptian king's name plus his actual name. His Greek name is Alexander. It's written, sorry, there it is, in the two cartouches there. Left one is his Egyptian name and the right one says Alexander. And you can see here, again, he's got his crown on saying that he's the king and the pharaoh. This one here is the warrior helmet, meaning that not only is he the king, but he's also the head of the military, etc., and he's a warrior. Very, very cool. And then you can see here, making offerings to various gods as he goes along, including the god of fertility here, you can see with a ginormous shlong, and so on and so forth. We now come into the room itself. No one's allowed in here except for the high priest and the king himself. Very, very cool. Lots of art in here as well. So there you go, guys. I hope you enjoyed this quick tour of Luxor Temple. My camera is literally switching off and melting because of the heat. So I'm gonna have to end the video now. But I hope you enjoyed this virtual tour, and please make sure that you do come and visit here if you do ever come to Luxor, and make sure you do have a guide because there's so much stuff that's interesting in there to know about. I've just given you a real quick overview of some of the main highlights there, but there's so much more to learn and to understand in there. Well worth a visit, and until next time.